Good morning, everybody. It's Jim Cardwell here of Northern Powergrid, and welcome to our webinar on moving to a distribution system operator. I'm sat here with Andy Jenkins, my colleague, and just to give by way of introduction, I'm responsible for our program that we're running at the moment on flexibility and DSO, distribution system operator, and Andy, as my colleague, has much of the activity we're doing on DSO in his area, particularly, I suppose, with respect to charging and the commercial arrangements, because Andy is responsible for setting our network prices today and looking indeed at what the future prices are going to be. And a lot of DSO is to do with pricing as well as technology. So we'll unpack some of those themes as we go through the webinar. Maybe just to start, might just start with the objectives for the webinar, of which there are 4. So I guess the first one is really to make sure that we're sharing with you our vision and plans, enabling us to seek views. We certainly appreciate there's a lot going on in this area at the moment, and we certainly don't operate in a vacuum. We want to make sure that what we're doing is relevant to our customers and our other stakeholders. So that's why we're making ourselves available like this, and I guess this is a wider program in that sense. On the collaboration point, we want to provide a link to what our trade association, the Energy Networks Association, is doing on its Open Networks project, because there's a lot of activity going on there, and we want to give you a quick update on that and give you a bit of a signposting to further engagement through that project. And also, I guess, finally here, it's just about trying to break down what is a very complex area into bite-sized chunks to give you an opportunity to engage in that and seek to, I guess, simplify, make relevant, and give the opportunity for clarification, because I think we all appreciate, certainly we appreciate that, and I think my colleagues and our stakeholders do as well. Just returning to that theme of a sort of ongoing conversation, we ran a Twitter Q&A last week, and we ran a couple of polls at that one. The first one was just understanding, I guess, where people were in terms of the first question, which is if we start talking about distribution system operator, what actually is it, before we start getting any more detail than that. Some interesting response back from that, particularly as quite a lot of this is industry stakeholders, as well as sort of it could be end customers taking part in this. I guess that's the joy or the disadvantage of Twitter. You never quite know who's out there, but we certainly got a feeling that people wanted to know what a distribution system operator is, and as such, and as you can see, the second poll we ran, which is what would you like in this webinar, for those of you who took part in that, unsurprisingly, I guess there was quite a bit of correlation there between seeking answers to that question. So we're going to try and make sure we carve out a decent chunk of time when Andy speaks and takes us through what a DSO is and where we are on that. And just to say on polls, I suppose, we're going to run a couple of polls while we're with you this morning. And there's one poll just going live now, which is essentially just a rerun of that first question. So do you understand what a distribution system operator is? So we're keen just to test the pulse or test the temperature of the water as we start this conversation today. So in terms of where we are, this just lays out the structure for the sort of slides we've come to share with you. I guess the only thing I wanted to say of significance is that we've put DSO definition up top to sort of respond to the points we got previously, and also we're leaving plenty of time for questions. Now, on the questions, hopefully you can find the right buttons on your screen. I think it's pretty intuitive, even I understand it, and those are open now, so you don't have to wait till the end. But if you wish to form an orderly queue and wait till the end, that's also fine. If you'd rather concentrate on what's being said, it's really up to you. But we'll come along to those at the end, and we'll seek to bite off as many of those as we can. But we are looking to finish by with a sort of 1 hour, so that'll be 11:30 this morning, if you're listening to this live. So at that point, I'll just go on to the drivers for DSO. I guess from my perspective, this is really about why DSO, why flexibility, what's it all about. I'm going to move fairly quickly through the gears on this one, because I don't think this is where the most value for our conversation today is really going to be had. And because I think a large number of you will be up to speed with this, and what we're saying here is just reinforcing what I suspect a large number of you already know. So this is really about the changing use. So you see two depictions of a system here. On the left, the classic energy system with the sort of top-down flow of power from central power generation through to demand. If people want more power, we build more power stations. That's a situation that's dealt with for many years. And then on the right-hand side, you see the classic kind of representation of a flexible energy system, just with lots of more people taking their power at different times. So that could be electric vehicles or heat pumps, or even producing their own power and wanting to maybe sell that to their neighbours. And so much more distributed power generation and not all centrally managed and controlled, I suppose. So government has put a price tag on this and said there's 17 to 40 billion pounds of value if we get this right by 2050. And I guess we as a networks company, as a distribution network operator for Yorkshire and the North East, really keen to play our part in this and have a key part to play. I don't think it's hyperbole to call it unprecedented change. I think it's genuine. It's when you put that £1 billion price tag on it, whatever that ends up being, it's significant, and indeed it's already happening. So this isn't just talking about something that's way off in the future. It's actually happening today. And that's been evident in some of the newspaper headlines. For me, this year has been a bit about a year of announcements, really, a year of firsts, a year of kind of changes. I guess significantly, it's also been about the whole energy system and not just about a particular part of it. So we are increasingly in conversations now about how the electricity plays into transport, plays into heat, indeed what the interaction is between the electricity and the gas system, which has not really been looked at before in any detail. So there's lots going on. It is changing and it's going on. And I guess the biggest change has been that we've seen to date has been in solar and the takeoff in this. I mean, the chart that we've pulled together here is actually an American story. We're American owned, a part of Berkshire Hathaway Energy. So we compare notes across the pond. We see this as a global phenomenon that's happening here. So the price has come down and the adoption rate has soared in the way that you see here. So I think that's pretty well established and been seen everywhere. Of course, in the UK, that's been particularly prevalent in the south of the country for obvious reasons in terms of radiance levels. However, we're certainly getting our fair share up here in the north of England as well. So moving forward, heat pumps, in contrast, has not taken off, and as well as for the engineers amongst you, we've got a nice reverse of power flow or refrigeration cycle diagram on the left-hand side there. But on the right-hand side here, you see a forecast that was put together in 2013 originally in a report that was done there, talking about the sort of adoption of heat pumps and what that could do to electricity networks in terms of the extra demands placed upon it. But actually, as you can see from the diamond that we've placed on it, when we looked at some of the data, you know, the world has not gone in line with that forecast. And I think heat as a vector in electricity use is probably the one area where there's the most open questions at the moment. Generation, we're seeing a rise, as I said, in distributed generation. We've now got connected about over 3.6 gigawatts of generation connected at the distribution level in our system. Transport, we've seen real momentum with that. Heating, quite a lot of uncertainty. Which brings me back to just transport, that theme of transport and the rollout of electric vehicles. So I guess another plot here, another sort of global view, because these are global trends that we're seeing in terms of the adoption of electric vehicles and how that's sort of panning out, and what's going on there in terms of the costs. And of course, it's driven by batteries. And what we're seeing is that the cost of batteries is going down, primarily by the economies of scale as they go into vehicles, and then that's leading then to more uses, both on those vehicles or indeed via grid scale applications. So we're seeing that, and that's causing us to do a lot of work with electric vehicles and think about their uses, both vehicle to grid, feeding the power back into the network when it's not required in the vehicle as a source of flexibility. Second life batteries, what happens when those batteries get beyond their useful life in the vehicle. We're interested in that and how that assists as well. So all those themes are the sort of thing that's leading to collaborations like the one we've got going with Nissan at the moment to look at those uses and see how we can get crossover between the transport and the electricity sectors. So this is, I mean, where this takes us is that, as the slide says, networks are taking centre stage. So we've got all these things happening. Here you see depicted in the black dotted line the classic trilemma of security, arguably still the most important thing for customers. Keeping the lights on is still fundamental to our role today, and it will be in the future. But it's got to be done affordably and while we're decarbonising. So it's dealing with that intermittency of renewables at a local level. It's dealing at a central level with the fact that nuclear is quite inflexible. So we've got a bit of a contrast there. And then the rise of flexibility products and giving customers the ability to engage in that system and the central role of transmission and distribution networks in making that happen. So that's kind of our depiction, if you like, of that's happening. Where's government coming from? Well, here it is, hot off the presses, or still relatively hot. All those actions that are placed in the Smart Systems and Flexibility Plan are arranged around those three themes. So here we see, technologies, a number of sort of commercial and consumer issues there, all laid out here. And I guess it just does emphasise the fact that technology is important, but this is not about the technology. It's about the commercial and regulatory, and it's also about the making sure that we've got our customers in mind, and we're thinking about our customers in terms of the way we move forward on this. So a raft of actions are going on there, which we in the sector are fully engaged in seeking to solve and move forward. So at that point, I need to draw breath, and Andy, I'm going to draw you in now to take on the DSO definition.
Thank you, Jim. I guess just before I move through these slides, the whole transition to DSO is affecting the whole of the UK, and it's common issues that are driving that. So it's that growth in renewable generation that's out there that's more intermittent than it has been in the past, and how do we balance the network more flexibly and both locally as well. And the scale and timing of the requirement for DSO will be different across the country. So there's different issues affecting different parts of the country as we move through. And what that means is that the future shape of the energy system is currently massively uncertain, and there's many variables to play. But you've got to start somewhere. And one of the key areas that collaboration is taking place is part of the ENA Open Networks Group, that is one of the key vehicles that are looking to address some of those 29 points that Jim had up on the Ofgem and Bay's Smart Systems and Flexibility Plan that we just saw. But if we just sort of look at where we are nationally in terms of a definition of a DSO, then what we've got on screen at the moment is the ENA view, and this is an evolving view that we've got at the moment that's been pulled together by the DNO system operators and others as well. And that is really going to get revisited over time as this project develops, and we'll keep using this as a touch point to say, well, right, is it the right definition, and can we move forward? But some of the key things out there is it's talking about being an active distribution system. So as well as the security in operating it, we need to have an active system that comprises the networks, and that's both distribution and transmission, demand generation and other flexible energy sources. And importantly, it needs to be a neutral facilitator of an open and accessible market. So, we don't see the DSO as being somebody that picks winners and losers or favourites in that respect. And certainly, it needs to avoid any cross-subsidies between different markets and things like that. But ultimately, what you'll get is that it will enable customers to be both producers and consumers. It should enable better customer access and allow local trading, and which in turn will give greater choice to customers and better customer service as we move forward. In terms of what are the roles and responsibilities, as I say, these are still developing, but there's 7 roles and responsibilities that are on the screen there. in terms of all of these, they will require DNOs to develop a broader range of new competencies. So, some of these are things that we are doing now and will be extensions to what we're doing. Others will be brand new things that we need to develop and, will develop over time as we move forward. But there's a whole range of functions there that need to be considered. You've still got the important things of network resilience and security at the top there. But as Jim mentioned earlier, it's more now talking about that whole system approach in terms of stability and in terms of optimization of the system. And, cost is important. So it needs to provide that fair and cost-effective access to the distribution network, but equally influencing people's behavior. So, can we get things out there that will influence how people react to make it cheaper for the whole system as things move forward? And one of the key things right down at the bottom there is, maintaining systems, processes and data. Data will become more and more important in this, particularly with the rollout of smart meters and things like that. Then we'll get more and more data coming in so that we can manage the network in a much faster, more agile way than we currently do. Just sort of pulling it back to a charges sort of perspective, and this is an MPG view rather than a national view, but we see that in the charging world, going forward, as we move from where we are today, where we just basically have a connection charge and a use system charge, we see three different elements. So we see an enhanced connection charges, a simplified use of system charges, and then some form of DSO contracting. And I'll come back and unpack that a little bit more in a minute. But underlying that, there's the key evergreen principles around charging of cost reflectivity. So we need to make sure that the right price signals are there, that encourage the right behaviour from customers to drive the overall efficiency. But equally, we have got a network out there that has been there for a number of years, and we need to ensure that that networks recover their efficient sunk costs and investments as well. So, there's not a lot of dispute over those principles, but there's new ones that are coming on board with the DSO theme. So it's that fairness between customers, and it's avoiding cross subsidies and allowing free riders on the network and people not paying their fair share there. And it's also addressing the barriers, be that regulatory or commercial, that are out there. So a lot of the work that Ofgem and Basel are doing are looking at about access for storage, and is that right at the moment? And do the rules around that need to be changed? If I just go back to the three arrows that are on the chart there, we talk about enhanced connection charges. Connection charges are important to us because currently that's when the DNO has a direct relationship with the customer, and we can start to make informed decisions on what the customer's energy requirements are and potential usage patterns might be. Now, we do recognise that there are a number of different types of customers out there. Some are more active than others, or some are very passive and don't want to be looking at complex demand-side response type contracts and things like that. So we do see that the connection charges would be a standard connection charge offer with some value-added services potentially in appendices for those that want to play in that market. But we've got, it's at that time of connection where we need to look at that, and it all depends on what the system requirements are as well. If there's lots of headroom on the system, then we are less likely to be looking for flexibility products from people in those particular areas. But if we do move down a flexible product route, then we see that there's an opportunity to simplify some of the use of system charging methods and possibly a rebalancing of how we recover that revenue as we move forward. But in addition to that, that's fine for new customers that are coming on and gives us an opportunity to liaise with them. we also realise that we've got existing customers that might want to play in those new markets as they develop. So we do see that we've got to build a relationship in that respect and potentially have some sort of DSO contracting arrangements, which might be the additional appendices that are in the enhanced connection charges, but we need to be able to target all customers and buy in that response as we move forward. So that's covered things off from a more of a national level. I'll hand back to Jim to sort of pull it back in towards an MPG level and share what our vision is, and hopefully you'll see some correlation with some of the national work that's going on there.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. So, I mean, just picking up from that then, I think there are real echoes of a national position here. I think our view of DSO is not significantly different from others in the industry, other DNOs in particular. But the ENA joined up sort of pipes and wires view of the world. I think it's pretty similar. Firstly, the concept of making sure we hold ourselves to account, as the strapline says, we've got to make sure we've got a compelling value position for customers and all stakeholders here. So it's got to be customer led. We do expect a future of much more actively managed networks in what we do here, with more automation. I mean, we're seeing more of that happening now, but we absolutely expect more of it in the future. I think the key point, Andy sort of teasing out some of the themes there about the physical trading platform. This is really about us establishing that platform for others to come and bring their wares, if you like, to come and buy and sell their electricity. And that really is for us to give us that make sure that infrastructure is in place. It enables that to happen. It enables customers to not only make use of their electricity and access it at the right price, but also come in with new flexibility services and those sort of bilateral arrangements that Andy just described. It's really about establishing that platform. So in terms of where we take forward, if you were to say, well, where's your killer slide, if you like, from all this? There's a lot of slides here, I think this is one of our key ones, really, about sort of trying to boil down. I said that one of the objectives of what we're seeking to do here is trying to boil down a load of really complex words and concepts and hold ourselves on target in terms of where we're going. And this one here, this kind of image here you see is, you see depicted in this kind of red ring of DSO that's presented on this diagram, all that more current and indeed future uses of electricity, just more of it in terms of storage that we might be seeing at a domestic level, transport, and other sort of heating applications and generation. And we see that our role is transitioning here to a series of regional DSOs, as it says there, of sufficient size and capacity to be accountable. It's really quite important, I think, there's a go-to area for a particular part to say who is accountable for this, that we don't see a proliferation of duties and complexities, that it all becomes a bit ambiguous as to who actually is holding the reins for this system in a particular area. There's an opportunity here for that interconnection and the sort of interlocking of the rings that you see here to really to provide value in terms of the resilience of the system. I guess in a couple of areas. On the physical side, and the whole effects of weather and other sort of natural issues that we have to contend with in maintaining the resilience of that network, and also, of course, the cyber threat that's increasingly there. And if you have a series of connecting with firewalls and that sort of thing, we think that we can get more resilience into the system. We've covered off on the physical trading platform to then enable a market to then trade on top of that neutral platform providing. It does enable us to be a market maker, because at the moment we're in a situation where we have National Grid as the system operator being a single buyer really of flexibility services. We're starting to see DNOs, as the need arises, dipping their toes into water and seeking to and laying out their stall, if you like, for what services they'd like to buy from the market. So it does provide that, and we do expect more of that. But we also fully expect what we do at a regional level as DSOs to enable customers to then go further up the system and continue to provide those important balancing services that will assist the grid nationally. So local balancing and indeed national balancing. So we're on a transition here. This is not a move from an old world to a new world. This is a continual change process that we're going through here at the moment. And I guess on different parts of what you see here, there's different sort of changes going through. We're at different stages on this. But you see here a move from a very passive network right the way through to a much more autonomous network. And in all these things, be it in the hardware that we're doing, the new trading arrangements that we're putting in, the grid services, the degree of intelligence in the network, all these things are moving us forward and changing as we go, and that is a transition that's in progress. So while we're doing that and getting on with that, in many respects, this is a story about least regrets investment here, and looking for those common least regrets pathways that we can do to make sure that we invest wisely and seek to use commercial solutions to defer some of that need for physical reinforcement and high cost capital expenditure when we can. There are many questions that still arise, and we've sort of set them out in three areas here, really. One is about the industry architecture that you see there, and this is really about the functions, the roles, and the responsibilities. And there's lots of open questions in that sense of how that's going to work. We then talk about the market design, which is really then starting to get a bit into what is traded, how is it traded, where is it traded, all sort of fairly open questions. And then you have the solutions that will then deliver against that. So if you've got a point architecture, roles and responsibilities, you've got market design about what are those commercials, what's actually being traded, and then you've got the way to make it so in the bottom right corner there. And I guess together that they give us then a holistic description or a view of what the DSO is. So Andy, I might hand back to you now, and you can take us through some of what we're doing in Northern Powergrid.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. So I guess we'll start off with the DSO strategy as how we're trying to move this forward, and it's a bit like a three-legged stool in terms of three different areas that we're actually looking to take things forward. So there's the scoping of the future, so trying to answer those big open questions about the market design and the industry architecture that you were just talking about as part of that Venn diagram there, Jim. And certainly we've got a number of innovation projects that we're looking at in that area. And I think that's an important point that within Northern Powergrid, within all of our innovation projects now, there's always that slant that says, well, what does this mean for DSO and how does it move us along this journey that we're going on and take us in the right direction? There's then the low regrets, just get on with it. You know, this is a definite thing that will take us in the right direction. So let's not wait to define all the markets and everything else. Let's just get on with it and demonstrate and learn through doing some of these things. And then there's a general building of capability. So starting to try and future-proof our networks and make sure that we're ready for what is coming in the future, so that it's not, well, let's start this brave new world and suddenly say, yes, but we need to do X, Y, and Z before we can actually do that. So we're starting to look at some of that building new capability so that we're ready for the transition as it comes through. And just want to sort of pick out a couple of projects in each of those areas. So in terms of the scope in the future, we have just launched our customer-led distribution system project, or CLUDS for short. And this is really looking for that sweet spot that Jim talked about. There's lots of things that are going off in terms of technical solutions to, well, these are the technical things that are required for DSO, but it's really, targeting at that architecture and markets position and looking at that. And we'll be working with the universities of Bath and Newcastle on this, and we'll be looking for the future structure of the distribution sector. And I guess what is key in this is that the customer is front and central in it. So, we need to accommodate larger volumes of energy resources at least cost. and we need to deliver value for those DERs that want to thrive in a flexibility market out there. And what we're aiming to do is identify and demonstrate in this. So we're not doing big network trials and everything. We're using virtual demonstrators. So we're using lab and modeling and emulation to provide a low-cost extension to the practical demonstrators that are out there, which hopefully will allow us to test a wider range of scenarios, but also to do it in a much quicker and more agile way than doing large-scale demonstration. And hopefully that will give us evidence that we can feed into as well the Open Networks project that's happening with collaboration with other DNOs. So it's not only understanding where those projects have got to and making sure that we're not duplicating things there, it's also providing some expert thinking as well to inform those as we move forward. In terms of getting on with it, we are trading one of the batteries that we have with National Grid. This is just started at the beginning of September, that we are working with Kiwi Power in terms of providing dynamic firm frequency response to the GB system operator. Again, this is in that sort of practical low regrets. We will be reinvesting any revenue that we make from this back into innovation and more learning going forward. So we're trying to learn through doing. So it's understanding some of the trading arrangements that are out there at a transmission system level, and what can we learn from that, and how can we use that at a more local level going forward as we move forward. And Jim, do you want to pick up the one on building new capabilities?
Yeah, sure. I mean, indeed, and just on that battery trading, I just sort of add that. I mean, I was in our control room earlier this week and just looking at what that, it just sort of brings to mind, I guess, some of the changes that we're looking at, and really I'm trying to understand what they mean across the business, don't they, really? Because I think that example, Andy, has the potential to impact people across our business, and it's really moving it out of an innovation team, if you like, to a whole business impact. But thank you. So on this one, smart grid enablers, we've got a chunky piece of work, an £83 million project that we, in our business plan for the current regulatory period, we brought forward some work that strictly didn't need doing. This is some condition. Starts out with a story about there's some key wiring. You can see some of it depicted in the slide that hooks up our outer field substations back to our control room. And some of that would be up for replacement at some time, and that probably would be in the 2020s if we were just doing it on condition. However, we made a case to Ofgem. It got accepted, I think, probably quite uniquely amongst DNOs in terms of bringing forward this particular chunk of our work plan. And we're now, I guess, slightly ahead of plan, making sure that we future-proof and upgrade the capability. And this is the example of that. That three-ball model of DSO. This is about building new capability and making sure that what we've got out there in terms of our control and comms infrastructure is sound for the extra duties that can be placed on it, typically from the new loads, the new need. I talked about when mentioning our view of DSO, the need for that better control, flexibility, autonomy down in our network. This is all giving us the enablers for that, the building blocks for that. And we're replacing some older kit with some new kit and making sure that the new stuff we put in with the added functionality you get with a time-based upgrade, absolutely making sure it's configured so that it gives us that really solid platform for the increase in use that we fully expect when transport and potentially heat comes along to give us those new loads and that new control. So a key issue, I guess, final thing on DSO for that part of it, building new capability. I guess we set quite a high bar for that in terms of what goes into that, because a lot of what DSO about for us is about seeking solutions to try and defer and put back investment in the network, particularly, for example, on reinforcement. Not that we've got a lot of reinforcement going on at the moment, but we're looking for opportunities for where, if there is a reinforcement scheme that comes along, where we might build a bigger substation traditionally to deal with more load that comes along, we might look at approaching the market for flexibility solutions. So that contrasts, I guess, with this example, which is about kit, and saying we're looking for those opportunities for commercial solutions as well as kit, where they would make more sense. So Andy, do you want to just go on with open networks?
Yeah, I guess we're fast approaching the time where we'll be opening this up to questions. So if people have got any, then now's your time to start sending those in. But before we do that, I just want to sort of draw things back a bit to the ENA Open Networks collaboration. We've mentioned it a few times as we've gone through the webinar today, and just want to really use it as a pointer to that project, because that is a major energy industry initiative that's going off at the moment that will help to transform the way which the energy networks works in the future, and it certainly underpins the delivery of smart grids going forward. So in terms of that, it brings together all of the 7 Great Britain electricity grid operators, so the 6 DNOs and National Grid as well. There's respected academics, there's non-government organisations, government departments, and obviously BEIS and Ofgem are involved in that as well. And that project is split into 5 work streams. So there's an open network steering group that steers that, but the first work stream is what we're classing as TD processors, or transmission distribution processors. So that's looking at the interface issues between both of the transmission and distribution system, and how we improve communication and coordination between the different networks. There's a customer experience work stream, which is looking at customer journeys, so particularly of interest to connections customers in that area, where we define different customer journeys that different types of customers go on. So depending on how passive or active you want to be in terms of playing in the new markets, then it tries to define, well, what route would you progress through the new world as we move forward. There's workstream 3, which is the DNO to DSO transition. So that's looking at some of the big issue things around, well, what is the definition of a DSO? What are the roles and responsibilities? How do you model that? How do you set up the right markets and everything as you go forward? And then there's a charging work stream that underpins all of that work that's going off earlier on in the other work streams, because at the end of the day, we will need to charge or even pay people for flexibility services to ensure that we're getting the best and most efficient network going forward at the least cost. So that charging work stream will be taking a lot of the outputs from the other areas and looking to develop new products and take things forward in that respect. And initially, it was only those 4 work streams that were there, but we were fast realising that the world is changing. There's lots of things happening at the moment, and there's lots more to come. That communication was going to be key to this in taking things forward. So we have now got a communications work stream that not only improves the communication between each of the work streams, but also looks to communicate things out in a much better fashion. And in respect to that, here's just a sort of snapshot of the ENA website, which is an excellent source for people to go to in terms of picking up the information. So the website is in the footer at the bottom of the slide there, but there is a whole section on the Open Networks project that is in there. And certainly I would draw your attention to the workstream products, because that is a section where every time a new product or a piece of work gets approved by the steering group and the advisory board as part of the project, that is where things get published and allow us to share with people. So it's a great reference point for people to see how this work is progressing and be able to reference back to it. And before we get into Q&A, Jim, I'll just hand it back to you for the next steps.
Yeah, sure, Andy. Thank you. So I think from our point of view, just I'll echo your sentiments, Andy. Get your questions in. I see they're starting to flood in now, so we've got a number to be going at shortly, so that's really good. So thank you for the questions that have come in so far. But just in terms of the further engagement and what we're seeking on that, we'll push out to you where it is once we finish this, so you can listen to this or share it as you see fit. We'll be pushing out stuff on YouTube. In terms of once the polls that we're running today close, and indeed, please send any further questions and comments into our sort of standard Your Powergrid email address. That would be great, because we want to keep this going. And Andy, you mentioned about the ENA's website for open networks, which is, as you say, is a good useful source for all customers, stakeholders to really get to grips with it. For those of you who aren't on the advisory group of that project, if you like, there'll be loads of other opportunities to engage. But we ourselves have launched only, I think it was July, wasn't it? I think our innovation webpage, so it's gone live fairly recently.
Yeah.
So we'll continue to. I guess that will be our primary avenue for putting things out there at the moment in terms of announcements and further details as the program that we're doing on DSO adds more and more momentum. So I guess at this point, it might worth just to say that we are going to be running another poll at this point. I think it's probably will be the last one for this webinar, just to sort of gauge your thoughts on how well informed you are in our thinking, because that will really help us to. I could see that maybe emerging in different forums at different times. Could be nice to see a trend on that one, or different communities as we go forward with this. So look out for that poll. It'd be good to get your thoughts in on that. But otherwise, I think we've nicely ended up with a good 15 minutes, at least 15 minutes to go with questions. And I see they are, as I say, coming in now. So I might pick off on one of those just to get us going. And the question I've got here is on about benefits, really. So question about benefits for electricity customers. So what, I guess, paraphrase, what's in it for customers from this? So I mean, just picking up on that, I think we talked earlier about the trilemma, which is typically used to sort of depict the impact of what we're doing and sort of put it in context. And I think that's a sort of good place to start in sort of answering this question, really talking about the security. So on security, as I mentioned with that kind of resilience point, we think that DSO has got a real opportunity to add resilience on this, and by having a locally by having a sort of local regional DSO, opportunity resilience. On affordability, it's about cutting costs. Really, as I mentioned, talking about coming forward with commercial solutions that allow customers, and a platform that allow customers to trade their energy and reduce their costs. I mean, one of the examples of that, I guess, this can come in many forms, but one example is the project we're running on vehicle to grid. We're working with Nissan and its supply chain on that project. We're looking how if you own a Nissan Leaf, what opportunity is there in it for you to earn a revenue by providing your power and your storage back to the grid as a resource, and that's an opportunity there that wouldn't exist if we didn't have that flexibility into the grid and start thinking like this. So that's just one example, but affordability is importantly there. Clearly decarbonisation, because a lot of this is being driven by the need to decarbonise and get carbon out of the system, be it that generation, heating, transport, whatever. There are a couple of extra ones, I guess, just to bolt on. Air quality, of course, is driving a lot of the transport, so I think that's in it for customers, just in terms of air quality standards. And we've got also maybe another theme for customers that's not naturally doesn't pop out, but it's about this whole idea of control and connected homes. I mean, smart meters are being presented in many respects on that kind of theme to all customers, to say this will give you control over your energy. And I think what we're seeking to do with DSO is allow that whole principle of connection, connected homes, connected lives, that's coming out through, say, smart thermostats and things, allow people to get more value from those and allow those to connect up all the way through the system. So, and I guess electric vehicles will be the classic again then, because you get smart charging on your electric vehicle linked to the grid, trying to reduce the impact on the grid and the reinforcement on the grid, and you might have that in the same system, say, as your smart thermostat. So for those customers that want to engage with that or can engage with that, it just gives them that extra. Or indeed, the other example we're already seeing in a social housing project in Newcastle, where a supplier there, OVO Energy, with its V-Charge technology on electric heating in multi-rise buildings, is looking to give customers more control over their heating, get better control over their heating, reduce costs for them, and a lot of that's paid for by providing grid services by timing when that heating charges up. So there we go. So the classic trilemma, and I've added in air quality and control and connected home. So that was one I wanted to pick up. Andy, anything for you?
Yeah, there's a few questions coming in around timescales for DSO, and it is starting to happen now. We do some DSO activities now, but certainly we expect it to evolve over the Rio ED1 period, but it's more likely to be in the Rio ED2 period when we see a mass uptake of this. So it's towards the back end of the 2020s, mid to late 2020s is when it will really take off, is our current thinking, and that's reflected in some of the open networks work as well. And what you will see if you visit that website is a roadmap that is out there. So certainly that was one question that was coming through there, and related to that, there was a question around, well, do we see that in the future that a DSO will get separated like the TSO is currently being? I think we're at the beginning of a journey in that respect, and certainly the working assumption is that it's DNO to DSO transition at the moment, and as the market develops and things start to emerge, then that may happen in the future, but that's not the working assumption at the moment. So I don't know whether, Jim, you've got any others that you want to pick up on?
Yeah, I'll pick up on the one I've seen about challenges and opportunities, I think that might be quite interesting. So really about what are the challenges and opportunities for ourselves, Northern Powergrid, in making the transition, and also what have we got to bring to the party in that sense. So I think there's, I mentioned earlier, didn't I, that this is a whole organisation major strategic issue for us to make sure that we're providing that compelling proposition for customers. We're providing what customers need, and doing it in a way that we're improving our service levels through time and doing it at the right cost. So that is going to touch all corners of our organisation. Skills is an issue that's quite often brought up. We see ourselves, we are taking on up to about 100 new people a year at the moment in terms of our workforce renewal program. So we are, this is really looking after natural retirement in our workforce. This is fairly common in the industry, sort of a demographic point about an ageing workforce, a lot of experience that's walking out the door, and highly valued colleagues. We're replacing that with new people coming in. So I guess we as we go forward, there will be new skills that we need. Of course, some of the traditional skills that we've relied on will still be needed. We'll still need to joint cables. We'll still need to maintain networks. We'll still need to replace some of the assets that are there today. A large amount of our expenditure is on maintaining in good condition the assets that continue to serve our customers well, and then there are some traditional skills to do that. However, there are more new skills. If I look at some of the skills that we've been increasing, quite significantly in recent years, I'd mentioned cyber security earlier. We've been, employing more people with those kind of skills and that knowledge. So that's sort of an area where you could say, well, that maybe wouldn't have existed, say, 10 years ago. So that's an idea. And so continuing that theme, that's really the world of operating technology, and it's linked to information technology, the sort of more business end, the office end of the IT, if you like, is linking through. And that whole smart grid enablers, you can imagine as you replace with modern equivalent, maybe devices that now run on sort of internet protocols and things, we're seeing a sort of growth in that area in our telecoms and our IT area. So we expect to see more of those kind of skills. In terms of sort of bringing the competencies to the party, and what have we got today? We've got, I think, what we bring as a regional operator is we've got a lot of local knowledge to bring here, and a lot of natural interactions and interfaces with our local stakeholders and our customers locally. And we've seen a significant rise again in the last 5 to 10 years of right across our business, a real push to engage more with our stakeholders, make sure that what we're doing today is relevant and in the future. And I think I just see a continuing transition of that. So skills in terms of that expertise internally, and that ability to share that externally, and to make sure that we're doing the right things by our customers, are going to be quite important to us. And lastly, I'd just say probably on the commercial skills that we need to do that. So I think that was that one. Andy, I saw one from a small house developer. Do you want to pick up on that one, or another question?
Yeah, there was one that came in around the FITS scheme, and whether that will be around in 20 years. I guess that's not a question that we as a DNO can answer specifically, because that's going to be driven by government policy. But certainly we see as we move to a DSO that there will be more options for customers to either buy and sell or trade their energy locally. So, there may be different opportunities that are out there. It may be that scheme progresses, but certainly in terms of, can I guarantee that FITS will be around in 20 years' time? Well, unfortunately, I can't give you those guarantees on this call today, sort of thing.
Indeed, I guess it's a case of outside of our remit in that sense, but your point about value stacking, as it's sometimes called, and seeking to get additional revenue streams is a key one, and I'd link it to that theme of us seeking to find ways to return value to customers where it's the right thing to do. So we're looking for those opportunities, particularly on flexibility services. I think at the moment we'd be unlikely to. One of the parts of this question was the sort of duration, I suppose. Can I take it to the bank for this length of time? I think our current view is that we'd probably be unlikely to stretch to 20 years, particularly as I guess what we're trying to do with some of our thinking on flexibility services, where we might approach the market and ask for a service off the marketplace to say, do a demand turn down, or indeed a generation ability to flex generation or storage. We're fairly agnostic about that, but those different sources of flexibility, we'd probably be in the few years kind of time frame in terms of contractual commitment, because what we see on our network is that things change. So we wouldn't wish to, and ultimately it's the rest of the customer base, if you like, that are paying for that commercial solution. And what we wouldn't wish to do is commercial contract. That'd be the word I'm looking for. Contract for something for a long period of time where things change. And actually, the need for that flexibility service might actually disappear. But we get it that there's that tension between business case that a customer wants to know that they've got a certain length of time on that contract. So we're kind of looking at that at the moment, and looking at developments as other DNOs move into that area as well, to see what we can do to do that. I'm going to bridge to another question that came in about whether DSOs will be providing frequency response contracts to the market to allow developers to sell services to the DSO rather than the grid. I think I'd sort of at that point sort of hark back to the slide as apologies, it's a bit of a cop out this in kind of that's a great question would be my comment. But that's exactly the sort of, territory we're in about that market design, really, and indeed in terms of what is traded, how's it traded, where is it traded. But that's exactly the sort of question we're looking to do, and I guess that's why the affectionately titled CLUDS project, or Customer-Led Distribution System project that we're doing, is seeking to do that. Have you got anything else? Any other questions on the CLUDS related, Andy? That you
Yeah, there's certainly one asking about other trials that we're looking at. So Cluds is a prime example of that, and that is trying to look at that compelling value proposition for customers that we're looking at to make sure that we're getting the markets and everything right there. So certainly that's a 3.5-year project that we're looking at, and it will look at, well, not only what are the market structures that are out there, but what are also the transition pathways. So how do we move from where we are today to where we need to be in the future, and what speed do we need to move at in that respect as well. So that roadmap and the journey that we're going on is going to be important on there, and there will certainly be some actual scale demonstrators that we do as part of that project to support the learning that comes out of that, and certainly around innovation projects. We're looking at quite a bit of work at the moment around electric vehicles as well in that respect.
Yeah, great. And I think I'm just a couple more minutes now, and I want to just make sure we advertise the poll results that we're going to throw back to you as well. So hopefully you'll be able to see those on your screen, if not now, sometime fairly soon. But the point here about battery trading, a question about the ownership of that battery and the link to the Ofgem's views on ownership of storage and moving forward on that. So the battery that we're trading with at the moment was funded by customers through the Customer-Led Network Revolution Innovation Project. That previously in our innovation work to date, we looked at, I guess, technical issues of how to hook up storage, making sure that we can service that need from customers as customers themselves are coming forward with increasing numbers of connection requests for storage. So that battery has already provided great learning in that sense, along with the 50 and 100 kilowatt units that we've got connected at low voltage from that project, and we're now seeking to deploy those on resilience-based work, and that'll be coming along fairly soon, so keep an eye out for that. But on the big battery and what we're doing there, this is really about we're reusing that battery, developing more learning for us and indeed customers from the work that we do there in terms of we move that forward. That's within the current regulations. Absolutely, Ofgem have made it quite clear that they've got a stance that says they really want it to be a market-driven for flexibility services and not a kind of regulated business, if you like. That's the stance that Ofgem has presented in the Smart Systems and Flexibility Plan that you've seen. So at the moment we do own it. We retain an open mind about that as we move forward, and regulations change and we go forward in that. I guess at the moment we're seeking to make learning from that. We're not making money from it. We're using it as an asset to test out how some of these processes work. And again, hailing back to the last question that I talked about, where one of you had asked about whether we'll be providing or seeking frequency services from people, then it goes straight back to that. It's well, how do we do that, and what are the issues that turns up? Now, Andy, I'm looking at the clock, and I think we're about done. So I just wondered if I could just maybe just hand back to you, and maybe you could just see what you think about the polls. Give us a comment on the polls.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. I guess in terms of, it's interesting that the first poll that we put out there in terms of do you understand what a DSO is, at the beginning of this, it looks like we had a more informed audience in terms of who was involved in this. So there were more people saying yes, whereas last time we had 2/3 of people saying no. It was only a third this time, so possibly a more informed audience that we've got there. And in terms of the latest one, in terms of has this added value to you and helped your understanding of where we are coming from as a Northern Powergrid, then it looks like it's a thumbs up all round in that respect, in terms of there's no disagreement coming out in that, and there's certainly some people that strongly agree that this has helped them in terms of the understanding, but the vast majority agree.
Plenty of work still to do, I think, is what I'm reading into that.
Yeah, and it's an ongoing process, as we've said with this, that this development will run for a number of years, and we need to keep drip feeding information out on a regular basis.
So thank you for your time. Glad that those of you who voted found it useful, and we'll continue to do some of this. And sorry for those of you that questions we didn't quite get to. We'll try and build that into our thinking as we move forward, and try and give you some more feedback on that in the future. So thank you very much for your time. We'll close it there.